Welcome to Rare on Air, the monthly podcast from Eurordis, Rare Diseases Europe. I am your host, Julien Poulain, and once a month, we will be exploring the challenges, experiences, and successes of people who live with a rare condition. In this month's Rare on Air, we return to the topic of the transformative power of gene therapies. We hear from Khadidja Hadri, a mother from France whose 9-year-old son, Rafik, lives with ADA-SCID, a rare genetic disorder weakening the immune system. Khadidja shares how one gene therapy radically improved the lives of her son and her family. Reflecting on the story of Khadidja's family, we then speak to Stefano Benvenuti, Head of Public Affairs at the Fondazione Telethon, based in Italy, the first non-profit to gain marketing authorization for a gene therapy, and in fact, the very same gene therapy named Strimvolis that changed Rafik's life. Stefano sheds light on how Strimvolis and other gene therapies work, while also discussing the impact of proposed EU reforms aimed at further encouraging the development of rare disease medicines, such as gene therapies. Khadidja and Stefano, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Julien, for the invitation. Very happy to be here.
Merci, Julien. Thank you.
No, thank you. So, Khadidja, I'd like to learn more about your story. Could you share with me how you learnt that your son had the condition of ADA-SCID? When did you learn that there might be a medical problem of which he needed help with?
So when we was in vacances in Algeria, Rafik presents some inhabitual symptoms like a recurrent lungs infection, some blue in his body, and he has his lymphocyte was very, very down. We did some tests, and when we come back to France, we have done more exams and more tests, and we discovered in mid-October 2015 that Rafik has an ADA-SCID. It's a rare disease. And they told me that this disease is more fatal, more dangerous than cancer. So it was
very scary,
very difficult to us to accept, to understand why and how Rafik has this disease. So it was very complicated and difficult experience for us.
I see. No, of course. So could you explain a little bit more about what you understand the condition to be? And you mentioned some of those initial symptoms, but what are the symptoms? What are the full range of symptoms? And what kind of challenges were presented to your family?
As I said before, the symptoms are a recurrent infection, a fungic infection, bacterial viral infection, eczema, the growth. He don't grow normally, and he has also lymphopenia. When we understand that Rafik has this ADA-SCID, he didn't went to school because it was not permitted to him to avoid infection. Because at this period, there is no treatment. They told us about gene therapy in another hospital. So at this period, I don't know Strimvolis. I don't know San Rafael Hospital. They told me about all the
I see.
To treat ADA-SCID, but we don't know. We wait for 2 years before finding Strimvolis. In these 2 years, Rafik didn't went to school, didn't do sports. Personally, I stopped all my professional careers because I can't do my doctorate because I have a master's degree in chemistry. So I stopped my career to take care of him, to stay with him, because we have to manage the apartment. We have to be very careful with the property. It was very difficult for us. So when we have a patient with ADA-SCID, we don't know when he will get ill, when he will get infection. And we don't know if this infection will be passed normally or not. So, it was 2 years, but it was a very long 2 years before discovering the gene therapy, and especially Strimvolis.
You mentioned before the podcast recording that your son, Rafiq, is 9 years old today.
Yeah.
How old was he when you learned about the existence of this gene therapy, Strimvelis?
He has 4 years, exactly 4 years.
I see. So he was 4 years old. And actually, this may be a question for Stefano. I don't know if it's possible for a 4-year-old to receive a gene therapy like Strimvelis.
Yes. In fact, most of the patients treated with gene therapy in general, but especially with Strimvelis, so the gene therapy for ADA-SCID that we were mentioning, they're all kids. And some of them are even younger, treated around 12 months, 18 months of age, depending a bit on when the diagnosis is made and when they are referred to the hospital, to the San Raffaele hospital where the gene therapy is administered. Because up to now, that is the only hospital where this therapy is provided.
I see. And so, Khadidja, when you first learnt about Strimvelis, was it soon after then? Was it long afterwards that your son would first receive the gene therapy Strimvelis? Or did you have to wait a while?
My history it's a little bit difficult to the others because no medicine, no doctor guide me to find Strimvelis. I do my personal research and I found this treatment, this hospital, this team. Okay, so when I take contact with the Professor Ayuti, he answered me and they give me, I was in contact with the coordination team. They give me an appointment to do all tests before to confirm, of course, that Rafiq has an ADA-SCID and to start all administration steps before administrating ADA-SCID. So yes, the answer was very, very quick.
Well, that's good to hear. And so when he first received the therapy, how did his health change and how did his life change and how did your family's life change?
We can see the results immediately. The specificity of gene therapy that we have to wait. Every patient has his proper body and his proper reaction to any medicine. So we have to wait. Some kids or some patients wait 1 year, 2 years. But I think in average, we have to wait 2 years to see a remarkable difference. So we can say after 2 years of gene therapy, we have seen that Rafiq's health has improved. There is a little bit less of infection. His growth is normal. So we have stopped also some medicines because before Rafiq take 3 or 4 kinds of medicines before gene therapy.
I see.
So we see the effect a long term.
Well, it's positive to hear that there has already been a positive impact to some degree. You mentioned also earlier, you feel like he gets to live more of a normal life now.
Actually.
What kind of ways is his life different, even outside of the medical world?
Today, I don't worry about Rafiq's health like before. I don't have a lot of treatment to give him, a lot of medicines. I don't went to hospital every month. Rafiq today can go to school. He progress and he can do sport also. Personally, I can also do something for me because, since 7 years, I was just for Rafiq. So I do nothing for me. I don't regret anyway. This is my role as a mother. As today, I think that I can do something for me. I can continue to learn, to read, to go to do sports, also to work. Yes, this is changed my life. We can also went to vacances normally. Rafiq can play with all the children. So there is very big difference between before gene therapy and say 4 years after gene therapy.
I see. No, that's really good to hear. So what are his favorite sports?
Football.
Naturally. Does he try to be like any particular football player at this time or?
No, he wants to be Rafiq.
Well, that's good.
Rafiq is, but I think that he will change his son avis because his father is a coach in football.
I see. Maybe. Well, I think it's healthy that he's not aspiring to be any particular football player, but just his own football player. So it is at this point I would actually like to ask Stefano some questions, because I'm aware that the Fondazione Telethon has a relationship with Strimvelis. But firstly, Stefano, why do genetics play such a crucial role, generally speaking, in the field of rare diseases?
Thank you, Julien. I think genetics plays a crucial role because we know that around 5,000 of the rare disease have a genetic origin. It means that the basic reason why a kid or a person is sick by rare disease is because there is something that is not working properly in his genome, so in his genetic background, and that's why they are sick. So that is the root cause of the vast majority of rare disease, genetics. That's why genetics is so important for rare disease.
That makes sense. Given that, of course, genetics play a fundamental role in what often is the cause of a rare condition, it's given this fact that gene therapies offer a lot of promise to improve people's health. Of course, most rare genetic conditions don't currently have a gene therapy, but what are the various types of gene therapies that exist, and how might they be used to address different rare genetic disorders?
So basically, gene therapy, the aim and the purpose of gene therapy is to go to the root cause of the disease and correct the mutation in the genome that cause that disease. So of course, these are very specific therapy because they tend to correct the specific mutation. And generally speaking, we can divide the gene therapy into broad categories. One is the in vivo gene therapy, so where you try to correct the wrong or the defective gene directly into the body of the patient. And the other type of this gene therapy are the ex vivo gene therapy, like Strimvelis, where you basically take the cells from the patient, in this case from the bone marrow of the patient, then you modify these cells outside the patient body and reinfuse back the cells into the patient. And there the cells start to multiplicate and grow, and somehow they start working properly. So this is the basic difference. And then you can make other categories of the gene therapy that is basically, okay, but how do we bring the correct gene into the cells? There are several different ways of doing that. Most of the gene therapy approved now are so-called viral vector based. So we use viruses modified, so genetically engineered viruses, to bring the correct genes into the cells, because this is what viruses does. I mean, this is what they do in nature, to bring their own genome inside the nucleus of the cell. So we use them as a Trojan horse to bring the correct gene into the cells. Other types of gene therapy that are under development with different ways of delivering the correct genes into the cells and different way of modifying genome. You may have heard about the gene editing, so CRISPR-Cas, all the techniques that really allows you to cut and correct the genome. There are a gene addiction gene therapy where you add the correct genome. So there are several types, but basically I think what we see now is that we have in vivo and ex vivo gene therapy, and almost all the approved products are viral vector based.
No, it's really fascinating how sort of gene therapies work and the different types that exist. Are you aware of any particular examples of successful gene therapy applications in the field of rare diseases that you find especially promising or inspiring? You did actually already mention Strimvelis and detail a bit how that works. Perhaps you could detail a bit further maybe how the Strimvelis gene therapy works, and maybe just note some other examples of gene therapies that help different rare conditions?
Yeah, sure. So Strimvelis, as said, is an ex vivo gene therapy. So the disease is due to a mutation that basically cause a defect in the production of protein that is crucial for the development of your immune system. So what Strimvelis does is that the bone marrow of the patient is harvested. So we take the cells from the patients, we select the pluripotent stem cells from that bone marrow. They're infected transduced with the virus that brings the correct gene. So once the cells are corrected, they are expanded and they are infused back into the patients. in the meantime, let's say between the harvesting of the cells and the reinfusion, the patient undergoes a period of some days of chemotherapy that somehow creates the space in the bone marrow for the new cells, the modified cells, to really grow and without competitor cells somehow. And so then they start growing, they start producing the protein that was missing. And so that whole process is the therapy. So of course, the drug is really a kind of a process. It's not just, a pill that you give to the patient. So it's a bit more complex than that.
I see. No, it is complex, but you've explained things very clearly, especially to a non-scientist like me.
Yeah, if you want to make other examples, and for example, a very interesting and successful gene therapy that we have now is in vivo. So in this case, you don't take out the cells, you directly inject the therapy into the patient, is the gene therapy for SMA. And this gene therapy is working very well. It has really changed the life of patients and is approved in the European Union, the United States, in Canada, Australia, so many countries. And it's really improving the life of these patients for a very severe and life-threatening disease. And the other therapy that I can mention is Libmeldi, which was also developed within the San Raffaele Telethon Institute for Gene Therapy as Strinvelis. Libmeldi is a therapy to treat metachromatic leukodystrophy, which is a very severe and life-threatening disease. Actually, is a degenerative disease that conducts kids to death within their infancy. And so when treated with this therapy, kids up to now, they prove to be doing well. So it's really life-changing. Again, this is an ex vivo gene therapy as Strinvelis. And I think that one of the key points now about gene therapy is that, as mentioned, most of these gene therapies are intended to treat kids. And possibly, this is not the case of Strinvelis, but in the case of Libmeldi for MLD and the gene therapy for SMA, what is really crucial is to treat the patients before or at the very start onset of the symptoms. So very early in life, before the degeneration caused by the disease progressed too much. And so it's crucial to identify and diagnose these kids very early in life. This is why, together with gene therapy, one of the things that is also crucial to grant access to this therapy is the newborn screening. Because if those diseases are identified as soon, very early in life of the kids, we now have some therapeutic options, which we may not have if the kids is grows up too much and the disease starts doing his damages.
Absolutely. And in fact, Eurordis recently completed a survey of thousands of people from across Europe from the rare disease community about their views on newborn screening. And the vast majority of people from the rare disease community really want to see an expansion of newborn screening programs, even if actually there isn't a gene therapy or some other form of therapy for a condition yet. Knowing about the condition, it opens up all the necessary and important doors to improved healthcare, but also just improved lives in general. So it's very good to hear you. We definitely welcome you saying that. Thanks, Stefano. I will be continuing my conversation with Stefano and Khadidja in just a moment, but I would like to share some important news. Tickets are now available for ECRD 2024, the 12th European Conference on Rare Diseases and Orphan Products. The conference will be on the 15th and 16th of May, and it is Europe's largest patient-led policy-shaping event in rare diseases. It is a must-attend for anyone looking to remain informed and engaged in pioneering solutions to improve the lives of people living with a rare disease. We're expecting to gather more than 1,000 participants, hundreds gathering in Brussels, and many hundreds more gathering online. Don't miss your opportunity to be among them. Get your tickets for ECRD 2024 today at rare-diseases.eu. One of the problems with research and development when it comes to rare disease medicines is the fact that for specific conditions, you can have very scarce, very small populations of patients, which often can discourage a pharmaceutical company or organization from developing a medicine for the rare disease or a gene therapy?
The very rarity of the disease may cause some important problems when developing drugs, both on the scientific and clinical point of view, because you have few patients, so it's much more difficult to study the disease, but also because there is no business case you can make around developing those therapies, or at least it's much more difficult because, of course, the R&D costs, the research and development costs for a drug are associated with the development of a drug are very high and are only partially related with the number of patients you intend to treat. And fortunately, I would say, both in Europe and the US, the regulatory agencies are very careful before approving a therapy, that it has to be safe and it has to prove it's efficacious for the condition it intends to treat, which means that the investment you have to make for developing that therapy is quite high. And of course, all the companies that develops therapy, they want, because it's part of their business, to have some profit after they start marketing the therapy. And so they need to recoup all the investment they have done in development of the therapy, plus some profit, which means that it's very difficult to be profitable and to recoup all your investment if you only sell, 4 or 5 doses per year. That's why we see, one of the reasons why we see the price for some of the gene therapies is rather high, because these are intended for treating very few patients. On the other side, also the production cost of the gene therapy is quite high. As I was mentioning, for the case of Strimvelis, as well as for the Meldi and other ex vivo gene therapy, these are the cells that you infuse are autologous cells. So you take those cells from the patient. So every dose of Strimvelis is produced in a personalized manner. So there are no 2 doses that are equal one to the other. You cannot produce them in batches of, 1 million of pills as you would do with a standard therapy, both because the patients are few, but also because of the specificity of the technology in this case. So this complicates things quite a lot, and it makes it very difficult for a company, a for-profit company, to make profit. And so this is why at some point Fondazione Telethon had to step in for Strimvelis, because the marketing authorization holder, the company that was distributing that therapy, the therapy was developed by our institute in Milan, but then it was licensed out before to GSK and then to Orchard Therapeutics. They couldn't really make a sustainable business case out of this therapy. But as Khadidja was saying, and the case of Rafik shows, the therapy works. And so as a not-for-profit entity that has funded most of the research for this project, we could not allow this therapy not to be available to patients who needs it. And that's why we decided to step in as marketing authorization holder. But of course, this is a very specific case. I mean, this should not be the standard model for developing drugs. So the standard model for developing drugs cannot be based on the willingness and the pocket of Fondazione Telethon or other charities for many reasons. But the basic one is that we do not have enough money to pay for the development of all the therapies that are needed in the rare disease space. And here is where the incentives that you were mentioning comes into play. We need to build a system in Europe that allows the companies to find profitable to invest in the development of therapies for rare disease. So, of course, there is a lot of nuances within the rare disease field itself. I mean, there are rare diseases that are a bit less rare and rare diseases that are very ultra rare. And so, of course, the business case, numbers counts in a business case. And so if the disease affects only, 2 or 3 or 5 kids per year, it's very different from a disease that affects 2,000, which is still rare, but the business case is very different. So I think that what we really need is a variety of incentives. So a graduation of incentives that may allow for-profit entities to still invest even in the rarest diseases.
So, Stefano, what would be your message to EU policymakers or members of the European Parliament or members of the EU Council who currently have the opportunity to amend the European Commission's proposals to reform the pharmaceutical legislation, and in particular, the legislation relating to the orphan medicinal products regulation, what would be your main messages to them?
Well, my message will be to be brave. I think that we need to have more long-term vision, especially for rare disease and especially for ultra-rare disease. We really need to have the courage to do major changes. And one of them would be, for example, to have a true single market for this kind of therapies, because we know that gene therapy cannot be administered in every single country, nor in every single hospital, at least for the very rare diseases like Strimvelis is one of the cases, but it's not the only one. You will probably always have just a few centers around Europe able to administer this gene therapy for ultra-rare disease. And patients will have to travel to those centers to get treated. And so we need to have one single market, a real single market for this kind of therapies with one price that is for the whole Europe and that facilitates people traveling around the country. So I think that this is one example. It's probably not the only one, but this is a big change respect to, I think the pharmaceutical legislation as it is now is not ambitious enough to tackle the needs of very rare patients. And this is where we really need to work a bit more. In the preambles of that piece of legislation, they said that they want to improve access to therapies, to medicines. Well, I think that for rare disease patient access is still a big issue. And if we want to change that, we need to have more visionary solutions, not just a bit of adjusting what exists.
No, definitely. Those are really important points. So, Khadidja, of course, your family has experience of the importance of a gene therapy and the improvements it can bring to someone's life and a family's life. What would be your message to people who are responsible for healthcare systems, people in the EU who have the power to make sure that pharmaceutical companies are more encouraged to develop rare disease medicines and gene therapies? What would be your message to policymakers about why more gene therapies should be developed?
Okay, there is a lot of constraints to develop some treatment based on gene therapy. I think that gene therapy is a real opportunity to save lives, and we need also to inform public of the existing of such a therapy. That is very important to me.
Absolutely, and understandably why. Well, that's been a really interesting conversation, both hearing your experience, Khadidja, of the impact of a gene therapy. And thank you very much for sharing your story.
It's a pleasure.
And Stefano, thank you very much for joining and explaining gene therapies for us, as well as explaining some of the ways in which we can make sure that they are fully embraced in the EU in particular.
Thank you. Thank you, Julien, and thank you, Khadidja. That was very interesting to be here with you.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening to Rare on Air. And remember, join us in May at ECRD 2024, the 12th European Conference on Rare Diseases and Orphan Products, taking place online and in Brussels. Visit rare-diseases.eu to get involved. But before then, thank you for listening to Rare on Air, and we look forward to you listening to our next episode.